Section 4 of the Arabian Nights Entertainments, Volume 3, translated by Jonathan Scott. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Gillian Hendry. The Arabian Nights Entertainments, Volume 3, translated by Jonathan Scott, 1754 to 1829. Section 4. The Story of Bedr, Prince of Persia, and Jahan Aara, Princess of Samandar or Samandar. Part 4. They had lived about a month together, when, as King Bedr was sitting at the shop door, after his ordinary manner, Queen Labe, so was this magic queen named, happened to come by with great pomp. The young king no sooner perceived the guards advancing before her than he arose, and going into the shop, asked the old man what all that show meant. "The queen is coming by," answered he, "but stand still and fear nothing." The queen's guards, clothed in purple uniform, and well armed and mounted, marched to the number of 1,000 in 4 files, with their sabres drawn, and every one of their officers, as they passed by the shop, saluted the old man. Then followed a like number of eunuchs, habited in brocaded silk, and better mounted, whose officers did the old man the like honour. Next came as many young ladies on foot, equally beautiful, richly dressed, and ornamented with precious stones. They marched gravely, with half pikes in their hands, and in the midst of them appeared Queen Labe, on a horse glittering with diamonds, with a golden saddle, and a housing of inestimable value. All the young ladies saluted the old man as they passed him, and the queen, struck with the good mien of King Bedr, stopped as soon as she came before the shop. "Abdallah," so was the old man named, said she to him, "tell me, I beseech thee, does that beautiful and charming slave belong to thee, and hast thou long been in possession of him?" Abdallah, before he answered the queen, threw himself on the ground, and rising again, said, "Madam, he is my nephew, son of a brother who has not long been dead. Having no children, I look upon him as my son, and sent for him to come and comfort me, intending to leave him what I have when I die." Queen Labe, who had never yet seen any one to compare with King Bedr, began to conceive a passion for him, and thought immediately of getting the old man to abandon him to her. "Father," said she, "will you not oblige me so far as to make me a present of this young man? Do not refuse me, I conjure you, and I swear by the fire and the light, I will make him so great and powerful, that no individual in the world ever arrived at such good fortune. I trust you will grant me what I desire, more on account of the friendship I am assured you have for me, than for the esteem you know I always had, and shall ever have, for you." "Madam," replied the good Abdallah, "I am infinitely obliged to your majesty for all the kindness you have for me, and the honours you propose to do my nephew. He is not worthy to approach so great a queen, and I humbly beseech your majesty to excuse him." "Abdallah," replied the queen, "I all along flattered myself you loved me, and I could never have thought you would have shown me so much disrespect as to slight my request. But I here swear once more by the fire and light, and even by whatsoever is most sacred in my religion, that I will pass on no farther till I have conquered your obstinacy. I understand well what raises your apprehensions, but I promise you shall never have any occasion to repent having obliged me in so sensible a manner." Old Abdallah was exceeding grieved, both on his own account and King Bedr's, at being in a manner forced to obey the queen. "Madam," replied he, "I would not willingly have your majesty entertain an ill opinion of the respect I have for you, and my zeal always to contribute whatever I can to oblige you. I put entire confidence in your royal word, and I do not in the least doubt you will keep it. I only beg of your majesty to delay doing this great honour to my nephew till you shall again pass this way." "That shall be to morrow," said the queen, who inclined her head as a token of her being pleased, and so went forward towards her palace. When Queen Labe and all her attendants were out of sight, the good Abdallah said to King Beder, "Son," for so he was wont to call him, for fear of some time or other discovering him when he spoke of him in public, "it has not been in my power, as you may have observed, to refuse the queen what she demanded of me with so much earnestness, to the end I might not force her to employ her magic against both you and myself, openly or secretly, and treat you as much from resentment to you as to me, with more signal cruelty than all those she has had in her power, as I have already told you. But I have some reason to believe she will use you well, as she promised me, on account of that particular esteem she professes for me. This you may have seen by the respect shown me and the honours paid me by all her court. She would be a vile creature indeed if she should deceive me, but she shall not deceive me unpunished, for I know how to revenge myself." These assurances, which appeared very doubtful, were not sufficient to support King Beder's spirits. "After all you have told me of this queen's wickedness," replied he, "you cannot wonder if I am somewhat fearful to approach her. I should, it may be, slight all you could tell me of her, and suffer myself to be dazzled by the lustre of grandeur that surrounds her, did I not know by experience what it is to be at the mercy of a sorceress. The condition I was in, through the enchantment of the Princess Jahan Aara, and from which I was delivered only to fall almost immediately into the power of another, has made me look upon such a fate with horror." His tears hindered him from going on, and sufficiently showed with what repugnance he beheld himself under the fatal necessity of being delivered to Queen Labe. "Son," replied old Abdallah, "do not afflict yourself; for though I must own there is no great stress to be laid upon the promises and oaths of so perfidious a queen, yet I must withal acquaint you her power extends not to me. She knows this full well, and that is the reason, and no other, why she pays me so much respect. I can quickly hinder her from doing you the least harm, if she should be perfidious enough to attempt it. You may depend upon me, and provided you follow exactly the advice I shall give you, before I abandon you to her, she shall have no more power over you than she has over myself." The magic queen did not fail to pass by the old man's shop the next day, with the same pomp as the preceding, and Abdallah waited for her with great respect. "Father," cried she, "you may judge of my impatience to have your nephew with me, by my punctually coming to remind you of your promise. I know you are a man of your word, and I cannot think you will break it with me." Abdallah, who fell on his face as soon as he saw the queen approaching, rose up when she had done speaking, and as he would have no one hear what he had to say to her, he advanced with great respect as far as her horse's head, and then said softly, "Puissant queen, I am persuaded your majesty will not be offended at my seeming unwillingness to trust my nephew with you yesterday, since you cannot be ignorant of the reasons I had for it. But I conjure you to lay aside the secrets of that art which you possess in so wonderful a degree. I regard my nephew as my own son, and your majesty would reduce me to despair if you should deal with him as you have done with others." "I promise you I will not," replied the queen, "and I once more repeat the oath I made yesterday, that neither you nor your nephew shall have any cause to be offended at me. I see plainly," added she, "you are not yet well enough acquainted with me. You never saw me yet but through my veil; but as I find your nephew deserving of my friendship, I will show you I am not any ways unworthy of his." With that she threw off her veil, and discovered to King Beder, who came near her with Abdallah, an incomparable beauty. But King Beder was little charmed. "It is not enough," said he within himself, "to be beautiful. One's actions ought to correspond in regularity with one's features." Whilst King Beder was making these reflections, with his eyes fixed on Queen Labe, the old man turned towards him, and taking him by the arm, presented him to her. "Madam," said he, "I beg of your majesty once more to remember he is my nephew, and to let him come and see me sometimes." The queen promised he should, and to give a further mark of her gratitude, she caused a bag of 1,000 pieces of gold to be given him. He excused himself at first from receiving them, but she insisted absolutely upon it, and he could not refuse. She had caused a horse to be brought, as richly caparisoned as her own, for the king of Persia. Whilst he was mounting, "I forgot," said the queen to Abdallah, "to ask you your nephew's name. Pray, how is he called?" He answering his name was Bedr, the full moon, her majesty replied, "Surely your ancestors were mistaken. They ought to have given you the name of Shams, the sun." When King Bedr was mounted, he would have taken his station behind the queen, but she would not suffer him, and made him ride on her left hand. She looked at Abdallah, and after having made him an inclination with her head, departed. Instead of observing a satisfaction in the people's faces at the sight of their sovereign, King Bedr took notice that they looked at her with contempt, and even cursed her. "The sorceress," said some, "has got a new subject to exercise her wickedness upon. Will heaven never deliver the world from her tyranny?" "Poor stranger," exclaimed others, "thou art much deceived if thou thinkest thy happiness will last long. It is only to render thy fall more terrible that thou art raised so high." These exclamations gave King Bedr to understand Abdallah had told him nothing but the truth of Queen Labe; but as it now depended no longer on himself to escape the mischief, he committed himself to the will of heaven. The magic queen arrived at her palace, immediately alighted, and giving her hand to King Bedr, entered with him, accompanied by her women and the officers of her eunuchs. She herself showed him all her apartments, where there was nothing to be seen but massive gold, precious stones, and furniture of wonderful magnificence. When she had carried him into her closet, she led him out into a balcony, from whence he observed a garden of surprising beauty. King Bedr commended all he saw, but nevertheless so that he might not be discovered to be any other than old Abdallah's nephew. They discoursed on indifferent matters, till the queen was informed that dinner was served. The queen and King Bedr arose, and went to place themselves at the table, which was of massive gold, and the dishes of the same metal. They began to eat, but drank hardly at all till the dessert came, when the queen caused a cup to be filled for her with excellent wine. She took it and drank to King Bedr's health, then without putting it out of her hand, caused it to be filled again, and presented it to him. King Bedr received it with profound respect, and by a very low bow signified to her majesty that he in return drank to her health. At the same time 10 of Queen Labe's women entered with musical instruments, with which and their voices they made an agreeable concert, while they continued drinking till late at night. At length both began so to be heated with wine, that King Bedr insensibly forgot he had to do with a magic queen, and looked upon her only as the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. As soon as the queen perceived she had wrought him to the pitch she desired, she made a sign to her eunuchs and women to retire. Next morning the queen and King Bedr went to the bath. The women who had served the king there presented him with fine linen and a magnificent habit. The queen likewise, who was more splendidly dressed than the day before, came to receive him, and they went together to her apartments, where they had a repast brought them, and spent the remainder of the day in walking in the garden and in various other amusements. Queen Labe treated King Bedr after this manner for 40 days, as she had been accustomed to do all her lovers. The 40th night, as they were in bed together, she, believing he was really asleep, arose without making any noise, but he was awake, and perceiving she had some design upon him, watched all her motions. Being up, she opened a chest, from whence she took a little box full of a yellow powder. Taking some of the powder, she laid a train of it across the chamber, and it immediately flowed in a rivulet of water, to the great astonishment of King Beder. He trembled with fear, but still pretended to sleep. Queen Labe next took up some of the water in a vessel, poured it into a basin that contained some flour, with which she made a paste, and kneaded it for a long time. Then she mixed with it certain drugs, which she took from different boxes, and made a cake, which she put into a covered baking pan. As she had taken care first of all to make a good fire, she took some of the coals and set the pan upon them, and while the cake was baking, she put up the vessels and boxes in their places again, and on her pronouncing certain words, the rivulet disappeared. When the cake was baked, she took it off the coals, carried it into her closet, and afterwards returned to King Beder, who dissembled so well that she had not the least suspicion of his having seen what she had done. King Beder, whom the pleasures and amusements of a court had made to forget his good host Abdallah, began now to think of him again, and believed he had more than ordinary occasion for his advice, after all he had seen the queen do that night. As soon as he was up, therefore, he expressed a great desire to go and see his uncle, and begged of her majesty to permit him. "What, my dear Beder," cried the queen, "are you then already tired? I will not say with living in so superb a palace as mine is, where you must find so many pleasures, but with the company of a queen who loves you so passionately as I do, and has given you so many marks of affection." "Great queen," answered King Beder, "how can I be tired of so many favours and graces as your majesty perpetually heaps upon me? So far from it, I desire this permission, madam, purely to go and give my uncle an account of the mighty obligations I have to your majesty. I must own likewise, that my uncle loving me so tenderly, as I well know he does, having been absent from him now 40 days, I would not give him reason to think that I consent to remain longer without seeing him." "Go," said the queen, "you have my consent, but you will not be long before you return, if you consider I cannot possibly live without you." This said, she ordered him a horse richly caparisoned, and he departed. Old Abdallah was overjoyed to see King Beder. With regard to his quality, he embraced him tenderly, and King Beder returned his embrace, that nobody might doubt but that he was his nephew. As soon as they were sat down, "Well," said Abdallah to the king, "and how have you passed your time with that abominable sorceress?" "Hitherto," answered King Beder, "I must needs own she has been extraordinarily kind to me, and has done all she could to persuade me that she loves me faithfully. But I observed something last night, which gives me just reason to suspect that all her kindness was but dissimulation. Whilst she thought me asleep, although I was really awake, she stole from me with a great deal of precaution, which made me suspect her intention, and therefore I resolved to watch her, still feigning myself asleep." He then related to Abdallah in what manner he had seen her make the cake, and then added, "Hitherto," said he, "I must needs confess I had almost forgotten not only you, but all the advice you gave me concerning the wickedness of this queen; but this last action of hers gives me reason to fear she intends to observe none of her promises or solemn oaths to you. I thought of you immediately, and I esteem myself happy that I have obtained permission to come to you." "You are not mistaken," replied old Abdallah with a smile, which shewed he did not himself believe she would have acted otherwise. "Nothing is capable of obliging a perfidious woman to amend. But fear nothing, I know how to make the mischief she intends you fall upon herself. You are alarmed in time, and you could not have done better than to have recourse to me. It is her ordinary practice to keep her lovers only 40 days, and after that time, instead of sending them home, to turn them into animals, to stock her forests and parks. But I thought of measures yesterday to prevent her doing you the same harm. The earth has borne this monster long enough, and it is now high time she should be treated as she deserves." So saying, Abdallah put 2 cakes into King Beder's hands, bidding him keep them to be used as he should direct. "You told me," continued he, "the sorceress made a cake last night. It was for you to eat. but do not touch it. Nevertheless, do not refuse to receive it when she offers it you, but instead of tasting it, break off part of one of the two I shall give you unobserved, and eat that. As soon as she thinks you have swallowed it, she will not fail to attempt transforming you into some animal, but she shall not succeed. When she sees that she has failed, she will immediately turn her proceeding into pleasantry, as if what she had done was only out of joke to frighten you. But she will conceal a mortal grief in her heart, and think she has omitted something in the composition of her cake. As for the other cake, you shall make a present of it to her, and press her to eat it, which she will not refuse to do, were it only to convince you she does not mistrust you, though she has given you so much reason to mistrust her. When she has eaten of it, take a little water in the hollow of your hand, and throwing it in her face, say, "Quit that form now you wear, and take that of such or such animal, as you shall think fit. Which done, come to me with the animal, and I will tell you what you shall do afterwards." King Beder expressed to Abdallah in the warmest terms his great obligations to him, for his endeavours to defend him from the power of a pestilent sorceress, and after some further conversation, took his leave of him, and returned to the palace. Upon his arrival, he understood that the queen waited for him with great impatience in the garden. He went to her, and she no sooner perceived him than she came in great haste to meet him. "My dear Beder," exclaimed she, "it is said, with a great deal of reason, that nothing more forcibly shews the excess of love than absence from the object loved. I have had no quiet since I saw you, and it seems ages since I have been separated from you. If you had stayed ever so little longer, I was preparing to come and fetch you once more to my arms." "Madam," replied King Beder, "I can assure your majesty I was no less impatient to rejoin you, but I could not refuse to stay with an uncle who loves me, and had not seen me for so long a time. He would have kept me still longer, but I tore myself away from him, to come where love calls me. Of all the collations he prepared for me, I have only brought away this cake, which I desire your majesty to accept." King Beder, having wrapped up one of the two cakes in a handkerchief, took it out and presented it to the queen, saying, "I beg your majesty to accept of it." "I do accept it with all my heart," replied the queen, receiving it, "and will eat it with pleasure for yours and your good uncle's sake. But before I taste of it, I desire you will, for my sake, eat a piece of this, which I have made for you during your absence." "Fair queen," answered King Beder, receiving it with great respect, "such hands as your majesty's can never make anything but what is excellent, and I cannot sufficiently acknowledge the favour you do me." King Beder then artfully substituted in the place of the queen's cake the other which old Abdallah had given him, and having broken off a piece, he put it in his mouth, and cried while he was eating, "Ah, queen, I never tasted anything so excellent in my life." They being near a cascade, the sorceress, seeing him swallow one bit of the cake, and ready to eat another, took a little water in the palm of her hand, and throwing it in the king's face, said, "Wretch, quit that form of a man, and take that of a vile horse, blind and lame." These words not having the desired effect, the sorceress was strangely surprised to find King Beder still in the same form, and that he only started for fear. Her cheeks reddened, and as she saw that she had missed her aim, "Dear Beder," cried she, "this is nothing, recover yourself. I did not intend you any harm. I only did it to see what you would say. I should be the most miserable and most execrable of women, should I attempt so black a deed, not only on account of all the oaths I have sworn, but also of the many testimonies of love I have given you." "Puissant queen," replied King Beder, "persuaded as I am that what your majesty did was only to divert yourself, I could not help being surprised. What could hinder me from being a little moved at the pronouncing of so strange a transformation? But, madam," continued he, "let us drop this discourse, and since I have eaten of your cake, would you do me the favour to taste mine?" Queen Labe, who could not better justify herself than by showing this mark of confidence in the king of Persia, broke off a piece of his cake and ate it. She had no sooner swallowed it than she appeared much troubled, and remained, as it were, motionless. King Beder lost no time, but took water out of the same basin, and throwing it in her face, cried, "Abominable sorceress! Quit the form of woman, and be turned instantly into a mare." The same moment Queen Labe was transformed into a very beautiful mare, and her confusion was so great to find herself in that condition, that she shed tears in great abundance. She bowed her head to the feet of King Beder, thinking to move him to compassion; but though he could have been so moved, it was absolutely out of his power to repair the mischief he had done. He led her into the stable belonging to the palace, and put her into the hands of a groom, to bridle and saddle; but of all the bridles which the groom tried upon her, not one would fit. This made him cause 2 horses to be saddled, one for the groom and the other for himself, and the groom led the mare after him to old Abdallah's. Abdallah, seeing at a distance King Beder coming with the mare, doubted not but he had done what he had advised him. "Cursed sorceress," said he immediately to himself in a transport of joy, "Heaven has at length punished thee as thou deservest." King Beder alighted at Abdallah's door, and entered with him into the shop, embracing and thanking him for all the signal services he had done him. He related to him the whole matter, with all its circumstances, and moreover told him he could find no bridle fit for the mare. Abdallah bridled the mare himself, and as soon as King Beder had sent back the groom with the 2 horses, he said to him, "My lord, you have no reason to stay any longer in this city. Mount the mare and return to your kingdom. I have but one thing more to recommend to you, and that is, if you should ever happen to part with the mare, be sure not to give up the bridle." King Beder promised to remember this, and having taken leave of the good old man, he departed. Section 4.